Hi there, everybody. I'm Fred Thomas, and you are watching All Things Bike. And today we are speaking with cyclist and author Tim Fahey, who wrote the book The Fun Mover Chronicles, Biking the Northern Tier. Tim, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, Fred. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Congratulations, by the way,
Thank you.
on making the ride and writing the book.
Thanks.
How long did going across the country take?
It took 72 days and a handful of hours and a handful of minutes.
And writing the book took?
About the better part of 4 years, actually. I was doing other things, but
Yeah, well,
yeah.
they're both hard. What was harder, writing the book or riding across the country?
Physically, I would say riding. Mentally, I would say writing. I really fell in love, though, with writing and the writing process on this bike ride. I had no idea I loved the written word so much. And it's a pleasure to be able to transfer the experience to a page, because you never know where these things fly away to at all.
Well, what was the inspiration for doing the ride?
Oh, I just needed a break. I was 53 years old, and I had been practicing a sedentary lifestyle for quite some time, with the devotion of a monk, as it were. And I had lost both my parents, and I think this trip was purposed by some of kind of the need to get rid of some grief. They both died relatively close to each other. And I just kind of put this, not writing the book per se, but taking the bike trip
Right. I can understand
on the top of my bucket list.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thanks.
Did it help?
It helped a lot. It really did. Sometimes I believe that the best medicine is 2 wheels and a long, long road.
Right. I can understand that. Well,
Yeah.
how did you persuade your family and those around you that you were ready to ride thousands of miles across the country without having done much preparation?
Oh, you can ask anybody. I'm the guy in charge of my household.
That's what you think.
Yeah, that's what I think. No, actually, my wife kind of very supportive, and
Right.
she kind of knew I kind of had to do this, and she said, "Just go. We'll take care of things over here at our end." It was my wife and then 10-year-old son at the time.
Wonderful.
And they were very supportive in the ride, and I could not have done it without them. A friend of mine said, "The real heroes stay at home," and I knew exactly what she meant when she said it, because my wife and kid stayed at home.
Well, you weren't alone, which I'm sure, at least for part of the ride, you weren't alone. You were
Right.
with Dave Wilbur. Tell us about him and how you came across him.
Dave Wilbur was a 26-year-old fine arts graduate student at Yale University between semesters, and I met him through the sale of my bicycle. I had a couple bikes that I wanted to sell to pay for my independent fabrication bike, the one that I took, and I met Dave through that transaction, and it just so happened he was buying a bike. I was having a tough time finding someone to ride with. It just so happened, was going to take a bicycle tour in the northwest part of the country, and he was going to figure out what the relationship between roads were to the experience of national parks.
I see.
And he's a landscape painter, so that was obviously
Right, so he was doing some research and he needed
Yep.
to do this kind of ride too.
Yeah.
Well, explain the Northern Tier for everyone. What
sure.
is it exactly?
The Northern Tier is a very popular bicycle route that goes between Anacortes, Washington, and Bar Harbor, Maine. I changed the very end of my Northern Tier route. I ended up in Scarborough, Maine, but it's a 4,200-mile bike ride across the United States. There's the Northern Tier, then there's the Southern Tier, which goes along the southern border, and then there's the middle tier, or the 1776 or 1976 bicentennial route.
Right.
And
Well, explain, the first part of the ride was the hardest part. You hadn't been riding that much.
Right.
Describe a little bit about what you were faced with.
Well, I decided to fly out to Anacortes and then cycle home, thinking that with every turn of the pedal I'd be getting home and closer to home versus just to some airport to fly home.
Right.
And also there's this thing called the prevailing winds theory, where they say the winds mostly go from west to east. So ideally, the wind's always at your
Right.
back. But I assure to all your listeners, it is not.
Yes, I know.
I battled headwinds, you know.
We'll get into that.
Sure.
But so what were you using in the end in terms of bikes and navigational equipment and camping stuff?
Oh, well, the Northern Tier route is all mapped out by a a company called the Adventure Cycling Association, and it provides 50,000 miles of bike-friendly roads, and I was using their map.
I see.
It's a series of maps, actually. It fits right in your handlebar bag, so you do the section, you do the Northern Tier route a section at a time. And the Northern Tier route, by the way, it essentially bounces along the Canadian border. It goes through 11 states and it ends you up in Maine.
I see. So they have already chosen very quiet roads for you.
Yes.
And it's all there in digital. So you're not using a GPS. You're not sort of not as a primary thing.
Yeah, but I did my trip way back in 2014, and some of you kids out there might remember it. But now they have it online, I'm sure.
Right.
But at the time, it was waterproof paper, and you fold it up in your handlebar bag, and off you go.
Yeah, old school.
Yeah, old school.
What did you do for road safety and personal safety?
Personal safety, I always wore a bicycle helmet, bicycle gloves, and I had illumination front and back. And at one point, I had a little triangular flag in the back.
Right.
Yeah, it went right here in the back.
Yep.
And I also had, at one point, one of those flags, those neon flags that are about 4 feet high.
I see. So that's great. So
I was pretty much, yeah. And also by having saddlebags, I was wider and people would see me more easily than if I was just a cyclist on a bike like this.
Well, yeah, perfect. Well,
Yeah.
and did you ride at night at all, or was it
I
only
had
during
one.
the day?
I was against it, but I was forced to ride one beautiful summer evening. But I did, and it was great. But I did not make it a practice whatsoever to ride at night.
Right. And there are you have a lot of episodes that you describe in this book, and ranging from a bear to a crash to wild coincidences. Talk about an episode that sort of sticks with you.
Sure. Well, I think bicycle touring is filled. The nature of cycling and cycle touring is filled with some of these things you're talking about, coincidences.
Yeah.
And it really puts you into the general population of humanity. And you can meet over the course of one day a reverend, an ex-con, a high school beauty, or a grandmother. There are people everywhere working their way through their own lives. And when you are traveling as a cyclist, a touring cyclist, you are by definition, I think, approachable because we cyclists are not a threatening bunch, and people are curious, especially if you've got 70 pounds worth of stuff on your bags on your bike. People are curious; they'll come and they'll talk to you about it. So that's just the nature of it.
Right. You ended up trusting a lot of people, and do you think you would have been so outgoing or so trusting in any other circumstance, or was it something about being on the journey that changed you?
That's a very good question. I'm a fairly trusting person, and I felt totally at ease accosting people for directions or answering their questions about the bike or the ride. So I was unabashed in my approach and curiosity toward others.
Right, and it meant then you rode with people you never met, and then you even spent a couple of nights at various locations, as a guest of people who simply said, "Yeah, come and stay with me."
Yeah.
Did you get used to that, or?
Not really. I mostly spent my nights camping or in motels. I did spend probably a handful of nights in other people's places, but I would do some pretty good screening of that. I didn't, accept every offer. Some people like, "Hey, you want to come back to my house in the woods?"
Yeah. So you still had your guard up.
A little bit, yeah. I mean. I want to live.
You got to do it. Yeah, exactly. We'll describe trail angels and last jabs of the day.
Oh, sure. Trail angels are people that come along at the last minute, oftentimes in the middle of nowhere, with help.
Right.
An example of a trail angel, I was on a long bike ride, and I didn't see anyone for about an hour. And there was a intersection, and my map really wasn't that clear, and I didn't know whether to go right or left. And after not seeing anyone for an hour, someone came up on a quad, answered my question, and left.
Right, and gave you the right information.
Gave me the right information, and that's just an example of a trail angel. Or the time I ran out of water summiting a pass, it was very late in the day, and I was bonking,
Yeah, right.
And a lady came up and she had 5 gallons of water in her car. I topped off all my onboard canteens, and off she went. That's a trail angel. A last jab of the day is when you're traveling and something comes along that makes the travel even harder. For example, I was pedaling all day on God's ironing board in the Midwest at the Plains, and I went and I found my hotel or a place to stay, and it's on top of a 2.5 mile climb.
Right.
I hadn't seen a hill all day,
right.
And there's a 2.5 miler right there.
Right.
That's a last jab.
I get it. Yeah.
And then you check into the hotel, and you got to carry your bike up 4 sets of stairs.
Yeah, but then you get to go downhill at the beginning of the next day. So
that's true.
Maybe it works out.
That's true.
Well,
I like that positive thinking. It's good.
Well, I guess you got to think and you got to stay inspired if you're riding 4,000 miles. And,
yes, you do.
And you describe all these moments of inspiration and these epiphanies.
Oh, yeah.
You had one that I thought was worth highlighting. Epiphany about riding into the wind for day in, day out. Tell us about that.
Well, the great thing about rides like this is inspiration comes with, as you well know, every turn of the wheel. I mean, the landscape, the scenery is beautiful. The weather oftentimes, bad or good, is dramatic and fantastic. But the thing you mentioned was my moment of epiphany. I was 8 hours into a bike ride, and I was doing about 4 miles an hour. I'd covered just about 24 miles in, maybe 30 miles.
Where is this, in Iowa? Or
this was outside of Vida, Montana.
Montana. So we're flat.
Yeah, flat. No excuse except the wind.
Right.
And that day I got pushed off my bike by a headwind. I was doing the best I could, but going nowhere. 8 hours in, man. I was 28 miles, something like that. And the wind didn't stop ever. And I was really in the middle of nowhere. And the epiphany I had after shouting myself hoarse with all the swear words I can come up with, I just thought about things differently. And my moment of epiphany came when I realized that if I just accepted the headwinds as part of the landscape and accept them, I would be fine. And it was as if, as soon as I thought that, all my angst went away. I still made 4, 5, 6 mile an hour headway, but I pedaled for another 8 hours or 7 hours. But I got to where I was going.
Right. So you just thought of things differently. I mean, there's nothing you can do about a headwind, so might as well.
Yeah, I wasn't constantly disappointing myself by waiting for the thing to lull because it wasn't going to happen.
Well, that's good. I mean, so there's more to riding across the country than just the scenery. There are moments of insight.
I embraced the suck.
Right, that's right. Well, tell us how the ride either changed or reinforced your views of Americans or the country.
It only reinforced it more to make it more positive. I mean, this is a great place. America is a great place. Our country is beautiful. People are great, and the commonality of the human experience is there to be understood and seen. Everyone's got the same problems. We're all just trying to get through our day, find love, a roof over our head, food on the table, and a good place for our kids to go to school and be safe, or that kind of a thing. And everyone has got a different problem set. One guy might be a crackhead. He's got a different day than the surgeon that I met, who was a racer. But they're still people, and they're still trying to get the same thing done. Get through their day, kind of thing. Right. So it kind of re-bolstered the commonality of everyone's human experience.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, you don't get that kind of experience from, riding around your neighborhood. And I imagine.
Bikes give it to you.
Yeah.
That's the only way you're going to get it. You could walk. But it's going to take you longer.
That would take longer.
You could drive, you'll pass everything. You could fly, forget it, you're over it.
Well, tell us about Maddie from the, was it the ice cream store?
Yeah, the ice cream store. The woman who, the recent high school graduate that dressed like a sundae.
And who was very, very kind to you.
Oh my God, yeah. There's a place called the Tip Top Dairy Bar in Oscasis. I don't know how to pronounce it. Oscasis, Minnesota. And it's called the Tip Top Dairy Bar. It's owned by a family, one of whom was, at the time, a recent high school graduate. She's probably a college graduate now. Right. But she dressed in a foam sundae outfit. And she served I went in, and her mom gave me an ice cream cone, and her dad was fixing something in the back, and I started talking to him, and he said, "Hey, you want a picture with my daughter who's dressed as a sundae ice cream cone or a sundae?" And I said, as a trip, as a trip memento. I said, "Sure." So I took a picture with Maddie, and then I got my stuff together, and she wrote me a note, and her parents thought I was, they couldn't figure out why she was writing me a note, nor could I. But I took the note and I opened it later, and it said, "Nice to meet you and God bless, and we're all hoping that you have a great trip across the United States." And I really felt great after that kid gave me such a good, warm, push.
Yeah. That gives you some more energy to go. But were you at this point ready for the ride to be over? Were you sort of mentally getting tired of the routine, or?
No, because I had never traveled the states of Washington, Idaho, Montana, Minnesota, Wisconsin, even parts of Michigan, and then I went into Canada and then through into Buffalo. I wasn't really ready for the trip to be over until about 4 days before it was over. Once I got back into New York and Vermont and New Hampshire, because that's very familiar to me.
You're getting closer and closer, and
I could just taste it.
And you've seen so much. I guess you've seen a lot of the backyard.
Yeah.
Well, what do you have advice for anyone who is thinking about doing this ride?
Yeah, I'll give the same advice that someone gave me. Do it. You'll never, ever, ever, ever regret going on a bicycle trip. Never.
But weren't there moments when you thought you were over your head, or just
the fourth day,
too much?
I got my butt handed to me by a very small, slight, in retrospect, incline.
Right.
But it's not going to be easy, but you got to do it. I mean, it's such a great experience. I am lucky to have done it. I'm also lucky to have spent time writing such a fun book by it.
Yeah. Well, how did you do that? I mean, did you, at the end of every day, did you stop and take notes, or how did that work?
Just like everything else, it seemed, it was coincidental. In order to stay in touch with my wife and kid, I just threw some stuff on Facebook, and I think I had one reader when I started, my wife, but by the end, I had like 1,000 people.
Oh, really?
Reading my episodic, descriptions.
So it was really a series of Facebook posts.
Yeah, just a picture. This is what happened to me today. Here's a picture, and here's some crazy stuff that happened during the day. And people loved it. There was a guy about a year after I got back. Some guy I didn't know. He said, "You're Tim Fahey?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I went to bed with you every night last summer." I'm like, "Oh man, I'm not that Tim Fahey." He said, "No. When my wife and I put the kids to bed, we'd flip open the laptop and would read it aloud and see who would laugh." Right. Second or something.
That's great.
So,
How do you describe the style of the writing, or does it have a style?
It's great literature.
A genre.
It's great literature.
No, but it's new. It's 21st century. If it was written on Facebook, it's got to be in its own category.
Actually, a good question, because what took me a long time was I did have these little episodic days, but transferring it from Facebook to an actual book took a long time. But it's irreverent in some ways, but it's just direct.
Yeah. Well, it's everyone's got a book in them. They say. I guess the hard part is finding the topic. Are you going to do the ride again, but from Maine over to Washington? Or?
I would love to do more riding. If someone called me up and said, "Let's go," I'd do it tomorrow. If my wife and my kid were okay with it, I'd go in a minute. It's
right. Yeah. Well, but
so fun.
It's fun, but
it's hard.
It's hard. Yeah. It's not for everyone. I mean, I would have a trouble with the camping part of it, but I guess you get used to it, or if you're well prepared, it's not.
I actually threw money at the camping problem. Whenever I could, I would do a motel, because 53 years old.
Yeah.
Rest is the second half of your workout, and if you're not getting good rest, then you're going to be in deep trouble.
Right.
You just won't go as far.
Yeah, understood. Yeah,
and it won't be as fun.
You won't be as comfortable. Well, where can we find a copy of the book? Is it on Amazon? Or?
It's on Amazon. Yeah, if you just go and Google the Fun Mover Chronicles or my name, you'll get that picture, and that's the book you're going to get.
There you go.
Yeah, it's going to be coming out in audiobook version as well, because I do know that people take long drives.
Right.
So if they want to Don't listen to it while you're driving because my voice will put you to sleep. You know.
No, well, that's great stuff, Tim. Well, look, thanks for coming down and
Thanks, Fred.
telling us all about it.
Sure, thank you very much.
All right, everybody, that was Tim Fahey, cyclist and author of the book, The Fun Mover Chronicles, Biking the Northern Tier. You can find it on Amazon, and if you have any questions about the ride, you can reach out to Tim on Facebook. That's all we got time for right now. Thanks so much for watching. We will see you again next time.
All Things Bike is brought to you by Fitworks, rider-first bike fitting, rider-matched bike sales. Locations in Peabody, Massachusetts, Waitsfield, Vermont, and Ridgefield Park, New Jersey. And Frame and Wheel, eBay selling services for cyclists, bike shops, and bicycle companies. Time, space, cash. Pick 3. And AD Bikes, the modern face of Austro-Daimler cycling and the bike company of the future.